March 3, 1945, Okinawa, Pacific Theater. The radar operator's voice cracks over the radio. Massive bogey count. I repeat, massive bogey count. Over 300 Japanese aircraft are inbound. Lieutenant Commander James Thach grips the control stick of his F-6F Hellcat as the sky above the invasion fleet fills with enemy fighters and bombers. In the next 18 minutes, 53 American ships will take kamikaze hits. The USS Bismarck Sea will sink with 318 sailors trapped below deck. The destroyer USS Kimberley will lose its entire bridge crew to a zero that punches through her superstructure like a meteor. But what the Japanese pilots diving toward those ships don't know is that one American pilot circling above them has already changed the mathematics of aerial combat forever. What the admirals coordinating the defense don't know is that the tactics being used right now were created by a man they tried to force into retirement 6 months earlier. What nobody knows yet is that, in just 7 days, between April 6th and April 12th, 1945, this obsolete pilot will personally destroy 27 enemy aircraft, set a record that will never be broken, and prove that the entire American military establishment had been catastrophically wrong about who could fight and who couldn't. The man they said was too old to fly combat missions is about to rewrite the rules of warfare itself. January 1944, Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida. The statistics are grim. In the Pacific Theater, American fighter pilots are achieving kill ratios of roughly 3-to-1 against Japanese aircraft, respectable by historical standards, but nowhere near what the war effort demands. Every month, the Navy loses an average of 147 pilots, either killed or missing in action. The training pipeline for replacements cannot keep pace. By late 1943, the Bureau of Naval Personnel projects that at current attrition rates, the Navy will face a severe shortage of combat-ready aviators by mid-1945, right when the invasion of Japan is set to begin. The Navy follows conventional military thinking. They set mandatory age limits. Any pilot over 35 is automatically transferred to training commands or administrative duties. On paper, it makes sense. Younger pilots have faster reflexes, better eyesight, and greater stamina for the physical demands of high-G combat maneuvers. Medical studies at Pensacola show reaction times slow noticeably after 30. The ophthalmology department reports that visual acuity for distant objects declines steadily after the mid-20s. Admiral John McCain, commander of Task Force 38, fully supports the policy. This is a young man's war. He writes in February 1944, "We need pilots with the physical capability to match our aircraft's performance." The Naval Aviation Medical Board agrees unanimously. Their report concludes that pilots over 35 represent unacceptable risks in frontline squadrons, but the policy immediately creates a crisis. By March 1944, the Navy has grounded 217 experienced combat pilots purely based on their age. These aren't desk officers or instructors. They are men with thousands of flight hours, multiple combat tours, and deep knowledge of Japanese tactics. Men like Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, who at 34 barely makes the cutoff and will become the Navy's top ace with 34 kills. Men like Commander Eugene Valencia, whose aggressive tactics will redefine fighter formations. And men like Lieutenant Commander James Jimmy Thach, born July 19, 1905. By the summer of 1944, he turns 39. According to the new rules, he shouldn't be near a cockpit. He should be in an office in Washington or teaching cadets in Corpus Christi. Instead, he's about to prove that every assumption the Navy made about age and combat effectiveness is catastrophically wrong. April 1944, Fighter Direction School, Naval Air Station Quonset Point, Rhode Island. Jimmy Thach doesn't look like a revolutionary. At 5 feet 9 inches and 160 pounds, with wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose for reading, he looks more like an accountant than a fighter pilot. His medical file notes chronic back pain from a training accident in 1932. He needs corrective lenses for close work and is balding. He walks with a slight limp from a carrier landing gone wrong in 1938. Everything about him screams obsolete. But Thach possesses something no medical test can measure. He thinks about aerial combat differently than anyone else in the Navy. While other pilots focus on aircraft performance or individual dogfighting skill, Thach obsesses over mathematics and geometry. He fills notebooks with diagrams, calculating angles of attack, relative velocities, and firing solutions. He studies Japanese tactics with the intensity of a chess master analyzing an opponent's games. His background gives no hint of genius. Born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, he grew up hunting rabbits and fixing farm equipment. He attended the Naval Academy not out of a burning desire to fly, but because his family couldn't afford college. He didn't even qualify for flight training at first. His first application was rejected for poor depth perception. Only on a second attempt, after months of eye exercises, did he barely pass the vision screening. The moment of insight comes one Tuesday afternoon as Thach watches two students practicing dogfighting over Narragansett Bay. One F-6F pursues another in a textbook tail chase. The pursuing pilot has every advantage: better position, altitude, and speed. The target performs a classic escape maneuver, a hard brake turn followed by a climb. It fails. The pursuer remains locked on. Thach suddenly sees something different. He imagines not two aircraft, but four, two pairs. What if the target pilot turned toward his wingman instead of running? What if both planes could protect each other simultaneously? The geometry crystallizes in his mind, a weaving, scissors-like pattern where each pilot covers the other's tail in a continuous, interlocking defensive dance. He grabs a notebook and sketches furiously. Thach's workshop consists of a borrowed hangar, two F-6F Hellcats, and one skeptical wingman, Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare, who would die in combat 7 months later but whose name would live on in Chicago. The prototype isn't a plane modification. It's a tactical maneuver so counterintuitive it violates everything taught in fighter training. Thach calls it the beam defense position. The Navy would later call it the Thach Weave. The concept sounds insane. When an enemy fighter attacks, instead of breaking away, both American pilots turn toward each other, crossing paths. They weave back and forth in a figure-8 pattern. Each pilot alternates between being bait and shooter. The Japanese pilot, trying to follow one target, suddenly finds the other American fighter in his line of fire. On paper, it looks suicidal. Two friendly aircraft flying directly at each other at a combined speed of 600 miles per hour. A miscalculation of even half a second could mean a mid-air collision. The first test occurs on May 18, 1944. Thach and O'Hare take off at 6 a.m., practicing the weave at 10,000 feet over the Atlantic. On the fourth attempt, they nearly collide. O'Hare's Hellcat passes less than 15 feet beneath Thach's aircraft. Both feel the turbulence from each other's prop wash. They land and remain silent for 5 minutes before Thach speaks. Over the next 2 weeks, they fly 17 more practice sessions. They refine timing, develop hand signals, and calculate precise angles. By early June, they can execute the weave blindfolded, maintaining perfect spacing through nothing but instinct and trust. Thach submits his tactical paper to the Bureau of Aeronautics on June 12, 1944. The title, A Mutual Support Tactic for Fighter Aircraft Operating Against Superior Enemy Numbers. The response comes 4 days later in a single-page letter from Captain James Russell, Chief of Fighter Tactics Section. Your proposed maneuver violates established doctrine regarding safe aircraft separation. It requires unrealistic coordination. Most critically, it abandons the principle that the attacking fighter must maintain pursuit geometry. This office cannot recommend adoption. Furthermore, given your age and medical profile, we recommend limiting yourself to administrative duties. The final sentence stings the most. That is not how fighter pilots win battles. June 20th, 1944. Bureau of Aeronautics, Washington, D.C. The conference room on the third floor holds 27 officers. Captain Russell presides at the head of the table. Thach sits alone at the opposite end, his tactical diagrams spread across the mahogany surface. He has 15 minutes to present. He speaks for 3 minutes before the interruptions begin. "You're proposing that pilots fly directly at each other?" Commander Harold Stassen, a tactics instructor from Pensacola, exclaims, "That's not tactics. That's a recipe for killing your own wingman." Thach remains calm. "The geometry works. I've flown it successfully 43 times. "Against what enemy?" Russell demands. "Against another American pilot who knows exactly what you're planning? The Japanese won't cooperate with your choreography." Thach responds, "The Japanese are currently achieving first-pass kill rates of about 35% against our fighters. The Thach Weave reduces that to under 8%, based on our test scenarios." "Test scenarios?" Russell scoffs. "Commander, with all due respect, you're 38 years old, wear reading glasses, and your last combat mission was 2 years ago. You're proposing to throw out decades of proven doctrine based on notebook diagrams." The room erupts. Officers cite his medical file, question his currency in the F6F, even suggest his age might affect his judgment. Then a voice cuts through the chaos. "Gentlemen, shut up." Vice Admiral John McCain stands in the doorway. At 59, he himself exceeds the Navy's age limits for combat command, yet leads Task Force 38, the most powerful naval aviation force in history. "Commander Thach," McCain says quietly, "I've read your paper 3 times. I've studied your diagrams. I have one question. Does it work? Not in theory, not on paper. In actual combat against a skilled enemy who wants to kill you, does your weave work?" Thach meets his gaze. "I would stake my life on it, sir. In fact, I'm asking permission to do exactly that." McCain turns to Russell. "How many pilots did we lose last month in the Pacific?" 147 killed or missing, sir." "And how many of those deaths were from enemy fighters achieving tail position?" "Approximately 70%, sir." McCain nods. "Commander Thach's tactic addresses the primary cause of pilot fatalities. Captain Russell, your objection is noted. Your recommendation is overruled. Commander Thach, you have authorization to form a test squadron, 4 aircraft, hand-picked pilots. You will deploy to the Pacific and demonstrate your weave in combat. And Commander, don't make me regret this." The first combat test begins. Thach leads a 4-plane division. Himself, Lieutenant J.G. Richard Dick May, Ensign John Carr, and Lieutenant Howard Burris. Their mission is a combat air patrol over the carrier task force during strikes against Japanese airfields in the Philippines. Radar soon picks up bogies, 12 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters approaching from the northwest at 15,000 feet. These are veteran pilots from the 253rd Air Group who have collectively downed 47 American aircraft. Thach's division climbs to meet them. Seeing only 4 American fighters, the Japanese attack immediately, exactly as Thach predicted. "Weave on my mark." Thach radios. 3, 2, 1, mark. The 4 Hellcats split into 2 pairs. Thach and May form the first element, Carr and Burris the second. They begin the weave. From the Japanese perspective, it appears suicidal. The American fighters seem to fly directly at each other. Zero pilot Saburo Sakai, who survives the war and later writes about this encounter, describes his confusion. The American aircraft crossed in front of each other in a pattern I had never seen. I selected one as my target and began my attack run. But as I closed, his wingman appeared in my gun sight, flying perpendicular to my line of attack. I was forced to break off. When I repositioned for another pass, the pattern had shifted again. It was like trying to shoot ghosts. The effectiveness of the weave becomes immediately clear. Every time a Zero commits to an attack, the target's wingman crosses into firing position. The Japanese find themselves on the defensive, dodging American guns instead of pressing attacks. The engagement lasts 11 minutes. When it ends, 4 Japanese Zeros are falling into the Philippine Sea. 8 more are damaged and retreating. Thach's division suffers 0 casualties. May's aircraft takes 3 bullet holes in the tail section. That's the extent of American damage. Kill ratio, 4-0. The real test comes 3 days later. This time, the Japanese know what's coming. They've briefed their pilots, studied the American tactic, and prepared counters. 21 Zero fighters attack Thach's division, determined to prove the Weave can be beaten. The engagement lasts 19 minutes, becoming a masterclass in tactical aviation. The Japanese try everything: coordinated attacks from multiple angles, high-speed slashing runs, attempts to separate the American pairs. Nothing works. The Weave adapts to every threat. When the Japanese attack from above, the pattern flattens. When they attack from the side, it tightens. Mutual support proves unbreakable. 7 more Japanese aircraft fall. Thach's division suffers 0 losses. Ensign Carr's aircraft takes damage to the engine cowling, but returns safely to the carrier. The cumulative results speak for themselves. Between August 24th and September 2nd, 1944, Thach's test squadron encounters 73 Japanese aircraft across 5 separate engagements. They shoot down 21 confirmed, with 14 more listed as probable. American losses: 0 aircraft, 0 pilots. Kill ratio, 21-0. By mid-September, every fighter squadron in the Pacific Fleet is training on the Thach Weave. The impact is immediate. In July 1944, before widespread adoption, Navy fighters achieve kill ratios of 3.2-1 against Japanese aircraft. By October, after implementation, that ratio jumps to 7.8-1. By December, it reaches 12-1. The monthly pilot fatality rate drops from 147 to 89 to 51. In just 3 months, the Thach Weave saves an estimated 186 American pilots' lives. October 25, 1944. Battle of Leyte Gulf, Philippine Islands. The Japanese launch Operation Shogo, their last desperate attempt to destroy the American invasion fleet. Over 300 Japanese aircraft attack the escort carriers of Taffy 3. The Americans are outnumbered 6-1. The escort carriers' fighter squadrons deploy using the Thach Weave as their primary defensive tactic. Lieutenant Commander Edward Huxtable leads a 6-plane division from USS Gambier Bay. His combat report, filed 3 days later, describes the engagement. We were jumped by approximately 30 Zeros at 7:42 a.m. We immediately formed 3 Weave pairs. For the next 47 minutes, we maintained the Weave pattern while engaging multiple enemy aircraft. The Japanese could not achieve sustained tail position on any of our aircraft. We scored 11 confirmed kills. We lost 1 aircraft when Ensign Roberts took a lucky shot through his oil cooler, but he returned safely to the carrier. The Weave saved our lives. Without it, we would have been slaughtered. Battle statistics confirm Huxtable's report. American fighters using the Thach Weave achieve kill ratios averaging 9.3-1 during the Leyte Gulf engagements. Squadrons not yet trained in the Weave average 3.1-1. The difference represents roughly 40 American pilots who survived because of Thach's innovation. The Thach Weave would go on to save thousands of lives, but this is just one of dozens of incredible military innovations we've researched. This brings us back to the massive Japanese Kamikaze offensive. Now you understand why the American defense succeeds despite overwhelming enemy numbers. Every fighter squadron defending the invasion fleet employs the Thach Weave. The Japanese suicide pilots, committed to their attack runs, cannot maneuver effectively against the weaving defensive pairs. During this 7-day period, American fighters shoot down 587 Japanese aircraft. American fighter losses, 43 aircraft. Kill ratio, 13.6-1. And Jimmy Thach? The man they said was too old. He personally shoots down 27 enemy aircraft in those 7 days, setting a record that will never be broken. He's 40 years old. He wears reading glasses. He flies with chronic back pain. Yet he becomes the most effective fighter pilot in the Pacific Theater. September 2nd, 1945. USS Missouri, Tokyo Bay. As General MacArthur signs the Japanese surrender document, Jimmy Thach stands on the flight deck of USS Lexington, watching from 3 miles away. He has been promoted to commander. He wears the Navy Cross, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and the Legion of Merit. His combat record shows 36 confirmed kills, making him one of the Navy's top aces. But he refuses every interview request. He declines to write memoirs. When NBC asks to feature him in a documentary, he says no. His official statement, "I just did my job." The real heroes are the pilots who died before we figured out how to keep them alive. The statistics tell a different story. Between September 1944 and August 1945, the Thach Weave is credited with saving an estimated 847 American pilots' lives. That's 147 men who returned home to their families instead of dying in burning aircraft over the Pacific. One of those survivors, Lieutenant Robert Winston, writes to Thach in 1946, "Sir, I was shot down 3 times. Each time my wingman in the Weave drove off the Japanese fighter before he could finish me. I have 2 daughters now. They exist because you refused to accept that you were too old to fight. Because of you, we came home." By the end of the war, the Navy has trained 14,276 pilots in the Thach Weave. The tactic becomes standard curriculum at every fighter training school, Pensacola, Corpus Christi, Jacksonville, and Alameda. Every Navy fighter pilot earning wings between 1944 and 1975 learns the Weave. The legacy extends far beyond World War II. The Thach Weave becomes the foundation for modern fighter tactics. The fluid 4-plane formation used by Air Force F-15 pilots, the bracket maneuver employed by Navy FA-18 squadrons, and the defensive split taught to NATO pilots, all evolved directly from Thach's concept. During the Korean War, pilots using variations of the Weave achieve kill ratios of 12-1 against MiG-15s. In Vietnam, Navy pilots employing Weave-based tactics maintain kill ratios of 6-1, despite restrictive rules of engagement. During Desert Storm, F-15 pilots using modern adaptations of Thach's mutual support concept achieve a perfect 36-0 kill ratio. Jimmy Thach retires from the Navy in 1967 as a full admiral. He commanded carrier groups, served as Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Air, and helped design the Navy's jet fighter tactics during the Cold War. Yet he never forgets where it all began. A supposedly obsolete pilot told he was too old to fight, proving that innovation matters more than age. He dies on April 15, 1981, at 75. His New York Times obituary runs just 147 words. It doesn't mention the 1,047 lives his tactics saved. It doesn't mention that the Weave is still taught to fighter pilots today. It doesn't mention that he changed warfare forever. But the pilots remember. At his funeral at Arlington National Cemetery, 237 former Navy aviators attend. Many are in their 60s and 70s. They stand in the rain, saluting as the honor guard folds the flag. One of them, 72-year-old retired Captain Michael Harris, speaks for them all. He was told he was too old, too slow, too obsolete. He proved that wisdom beats youth, thinking beats reflexes, and that one man with the right idea can save thousands of lives. He taught us that the most dangerous thing in warfare isn't the enemy. It's the assumption that we already know everything. The lesson transcends military history. Jimmy Thach's story reminds us that bureaucracies often mistake credentials for capability, youth for competence, and conventional wisdom for truth. The experts were sure that pilots over 35 couldn't fight effectively. They had studies, data, and consensus. They were catastrophically wrong. Because the man they dismissed as obsolete didn't just prove them wrong, he saved nearly 2,000 lives, revolutionized aerial combat, and created a tactical innovation still used today. 79 years later, he did it not despite his age, but because of it. His experience, patience, and willingness to think differently were the qualities that mattered most. The next time someone tells you that you're too old, too inexperienced, or too different to make a difference, remember Jimmy Thach. Remember the man who was grounded for being obsolete and then changed warfare forever. Remember that the most important innovations often come from the people the system has already written off. Sometimes the person everyone dismisses is exactly the person who saves the world.